Three old cowboys who remembered the West differently. A twisted history story. Before highways, before tourist maps, and long before anyone sold cowboy hats in airport gift shops, three old cowboys sat every morning outside a weathered store along the dusty edge of the Southwest. Nobody remembered exactly when they arrived there. Some folks claimed they had always been there, like fence posts or stubborn cactus. They were known simply as Hank, Mateo, and Rufus. Three old cowboys held together by sunburn, bad knees, and memories that grew slightly more heroic every year. Hank had once ridden cattle from Texas clear to New Mexico and swore he could still smell trail dust whenever the wind shifted. Rufus claimed he had been a scout, a gambler, a deputy, and briefly a dentist, though nobody trusted that last profession. Mateo was quieter, a Spanish-speaking vaquero who had grown up riding between border towns long before English signs replaced Spanish ones. Together they represented the real Old West, not the polished version, but the tired, hungry, sometimes ridiculous reality of it. In their younger days, they rode through Spanish-speaking towns scattered across the frontier, places where adobe walls baked under the sun and guitars played long after midnight. Towns like dusty plazas in northern Mexico and settlements across New Mexico territory where Spanish, English, and cowboy slang blended into one language, understood mostly by horses. Mateo always laughed, remembering how Hank tried ordering food in Spanish for the first time. Hank had proudly walked into a cantina and declared, "Uno beef and 3 coffees." He received a bowl of beans, a hat compliment, and a marriage proposal from someone's aunt. The West taught lessons quickly. The three cowboys rode together during cattle drives that lasted months. They crossed deserts where water was rumor more than reality. They slept under stars so bright they swore the sky leaned closer just to listen to their complaints. Hardships were constant. Boots wore thin. Coffee tasted like burnt optimism. And every storm arrived precisely when someone forgot a blanket. Once, crossing Arizona territory, they lost their way entirely and followed what they believed was a river for 2 days, before realizing it was simply a very determined line of ants. Another time, Rufus accidentally joined the wrong cattle drive for nearly a week before noticing none of the cattle carried his brand. He claimed later it was strategic observation. The Spanish-speaking towns welcomed them differently than the rough boom towns farther north. There was music, laughter, family gatherings, and food cooked slowly instead of eaten hurriedly from tin plates. Mateo translated conversations, though Hank suspected Mateo occasionally improved the stories just to make himself sound wiser. In one village, Hank believed he had been invited to a heroic celebration in his honor. Years later, Mateo admitted it had actually been a birthday party for a goat. The West had a way of humbling men. They faced droughts that emptied rivers, winters that froze saddles solid, and cattle stampedes that turned grown cowboys into praying philosophers. During one infamous storm near the Rio Grande, lightning struck so close that all three men dove into a muddy ditch together.
When they climbed out, Rufus announced, "Well, boys, if that didn't improve our personalities, nothing will."
They survived not because they were fearless, but because they were stubborn. That was the real frontier skill. Not speed, not shooting, stubbornness. Years passed. Railroads replaced long trails. Towns grew bigger. Fences appeared where freedom once stretched for miles. The West changed while the cowboys grew older. Eventually, Hank, Mateo, and Rufus stopped traveling. They settled near a crossroads town where travelers still passed through, tourists now instead of trail riders. Every morning they told stories. Each story became slightly larger than the last. A small rainstorm became a hurricane. 3 cattle became 5,000. A missed shot became an act of mercy. And nobody corrected them because deep down, everyone knew the stories weren't lies. They were memories polished by time. Young visitors would sit nearby listening, laughing at tales of cantinas, desert crossings, and the strange mixture of cultures that shaped the frontier. The cowboys never spoke about glory. They talked about friendships formed across languages, about sharing meals when nobody had money, about Spanish songs learned badly but sung loudly, about realizing the West wasn't conquered by heroes, it was built by tired people helping each other survive another day. One afternoon, a traveler asked them what the hardest part of the Old West had been. Hank said it was the heat. Rufus said it was the hunger.
Learning you're not as important as you thought.
They all nodded. Because the West had a way of sanding down pride like wind on rock. The truth was, the frontier wasn't constant gunfights and legend-making. It was long rides, shared laughter, misunderstandings in two languages, and friendships stronger than borders. And maybe that's why people kept stopping to listen to the three old cowboys. They weren't telling history exactly, they were telling how it felt. And in twisted history, sometimes feelings survive longer than facts. As the sun set each evening, the three old cowboys tipped their hats to passing strangers, watching shadows stretch across land they once crossed on horseback. The world had changed, but in their stories, the Old West still rode on, dusty, funny, stubborn, and alive. And if you listen closely in certain small towns across the Southwest, you might still hear echoes of laughter from old cowboys remembering journeys that grew better every time they were told. Because history may belong to books, but the West belongs to storytellers. As the years went on, the three old cowboys developed a reputation that reached far beyond their little corner of the Southwest. Travelers began stopping, not just for supplies, but specifically to hear their stories. Some came from Texas, some came from California. A few arrived wearing brand new boots. The cowboys could always tell. Hank would lean over and whisper, "Fresh boots, still optimistic about life." One autumn afternoon, a young traveler asked them what frontier towns had really been like. Mateo smiled slowly. He told them about evenings when lantern light filled dusty streets. Musicians played guitars outside adobe houses. Riders arrived speaking different languages, but shared the same exhaustion. Cowboys from Kansas traded stories, vaqueros from Sonora. No one worried about accents, only whether your horse was tired, and whether you were willing to share coffee. Rufus added that in those towns arguments rarely lasted long, mostly because somebody's grandmother would appear with food and end the fight. Hank claimed he once tried to win an argument in Spanish. He accidentally complimented another man's mule instead. The mule received applause. Hank did not. They laughed, remembering how young they once were, riding into towns thinking they were legends already written. They learned the West didn't care about reputations. The West cared about work. Fix the fence. Ride the herd. Help your neighbor. Repeat tomorrow. One winter long ago, they took shelter in a mountain village after a brutal snowstorm. Supplies ran low. Strangers depended on one another to survive. Mateo translated between families. Hank chopped firewood until his hands blistered. Rufus convinced everyone he could repair saddles. The repairs held, mostly. That winter taught them. The frontier was never conquered alone. Later, when railroads replaced trails and telegraph wires stitched towns together, the three cowboys noticed people romanticizing the Old West. Visitors asked about gunfights. They wanted tales of outlaws and fast draws. The cowboys exchanged glances. Rufus, truth is, most days were spent looking for lost cows and trying not to fall asleep in the saddle. The audience laughed. It was the honest answer. The real hero of the frontier wasn't violence, it was endurance. Waking up sore, tired, and still choosing to ride again. As evening settled one day, a boy asked if they missed being young cowboys. Hank stared across the road. "I miss my knees," he said. Mateo said he missed the horses, the quiet understanding between rider and animal. Rufus nodded. "I mostly miss not knowing how things were going to turn out. Every sunrise brought uncertainty. Every trail held possibility. Even now they carried the West inside them, in laughter, stories, and friendships forged across deserts and Spanish-speaking towns." As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched, they tipped their hats to a passing traveler. The traveler waved back, unaware he had passed three living pieces of twisted history. Not heroes, not outlaws, just cowboys who survived long enough to laugh about it. And maybe that's the greatest frontier victory of all.